The second Splatoon was released on July 21st, 2017. It was one of the first major first-party titles to be released for the Switch, speaking to the first game's success and how Nintendo knew they could have a new major franchise on their hands. As a system seller, it worked for me personally. It was the game I got a Switch to play, and remains one of my most played titles on the system. Octo Canyon, the new single-player mode in Splatoon 2, features a greatly expanded scope and more replayability. The single-player mode in the first Splatoon felt like a bonus, and could be 100%ed in only 3 or 4 hours. In contrast, my run of the entire Splatoon 2 campaign for this video, which I did not get all of the collectibles in, was around 6 hours. The campaign has the same number of missions that the first did, 27. So the increased length largely comes from the missions themselves being much longer. You can tell the production value that went into crafting the campaign was much higher this time around, because the levels themselves are more visually distinct. There are still often abstract zones and floating platforms, but can be distinguished between each other at a glance much more easily. The storyline is very similar to the first game. The Octarians, led once again by DJ Octavio, have kidnapped the Great Zapfish along with the other regular Zapfish. You are a new recruit for the new Squidweek Splatoon, Agent 4 this time, and it's up to you to delve into the new location of Octo Canyon to rescue them. The big difference here, and the coolest thing about this campaign, is that instead of your rescue efforts being led by Captain Cuttlefish, you're being led by Agent 2, Marie. Agent 1, Callie, is missing, and so your other objective here is to figure out what happened to her. The reason this is cool is because it reflects the events of the first game, not the single-player mode, but the multiplayer. The Splatoon games hold periodic events called Splatfests, usually once a month, which give the player a choice between 2 options, 3 options in the third game, and have you pledge to which team you support. Examples of some of these Splatfests from the first game are cats or dogs, roller coasters or water slides, and pirates or ninjas. By winning matches during the event, you score points for your team, and the team with the best score at the end of the event wins. The final Splatfest for Splatoon 1 was Callie or Marie. Team Marie, the wrong team for the record, ended up winning. The Splatoon team used the results of this final Splatfest to influence the story of the campaign for the second game. Because Marie won, she was the main character leading you through your missions, and Callie was missing in action. I've always thought that was a really cool and unique idea, and it makes the game's community feel more involved in the actual events unfolding in the world, so huge kudos to the Splatoon team for this. Graphically, Splatoon 2 is a noticeable upgrade from Splatoon 1. The Switch is not the most impressive console out there, even when it was released, but the jump from the Wii U to a newer system is pretty big. Splatoon 1 has aged really well visually because good art direction never ages, but the colors are more vibrant and the whole game just seems to pop more in the sequel. The ink now has a glitter effect, where you can see it sparkle and shimmer in the sunlight as you move around. The campaign is once again split into 5 sectors, functioning as a level select. The sectors themselves are much more involved this time around, sometimes to a fault, and even have their own hidden items, sunken scrolls, and a new collectible called Sardinium, which players can use to upgrade their weapons. That's right, weapons. There are now 9 different usable hero weapons, one for each of the weapon archetypes in Splatoon 2, and you can bring any of them into any level once it's unlocked. The game also keeps track of your best score and time for each weapon, which adds a ton of replay value to the game. You can also find a new type of collectible, tickets, which can be used at a store in the game's multiplayer hub to get bonuses like bonus XP or bonus cash from playing multiplayer matches. I like how much more in-depth and involved the sector hubs are now on paper, but my problem is that some of the later ones get a bit frustrating to navigate and to find the kettles. The kettles are still invisible until you open them, so trying to find where you're supposed to be going can take more effort than it ought to. One sector in particular uses invisible moving platforms as its gimmick, which, on top of the invisible kettles, makes traversing it the first time to unlock all the levels a frustrating experience. The biggest advantage this campaign has over the first game is the introduction of a lot more niche, what I'm going to refer to as gimmick levels. I don't mean to use the word gimmick with any sort of negative connotation here. A gimmick can be a fun novelty if it doesn't outwear its welcome, and that's what they are here. Like a level where almost the entire floor is made of trampolines, and so you have to navigate through the level while bouncing from point to point. These highly themed levels are a major addition to the series, as opposed to the first game where most missions boil down to, essentially, the same kind of platform and shoot through the level missions. And all future campaigns will heavily expand on this idea and the kind of gimmick levels that can exist. My personal favorite of these are the rail grinding levels. These are where I think you can really see that Ratchet and Clank comparison, as you are put on special rails that your character will grind across, shooting balloons, enemies, and obstacles along your way, as you jump from rail to rail. Without the ability to slow down or stop your momentum, this really requires you to be paying attention to what's coming up and practice careful aim. These will stick around in all of the campaigns released after Octo Canyon. Another new addition are these small Octarians who run away from you as soon as you get close. A few levels are built around chasing these guys down and trying to corner them, usually to get bonus orbs or a key required to progress. One fun gimmick introduced in this campaign are the giant squeegees. Squeegees are the little Roomba guys who clear any paint nearby them. The giant ones are usually set so that the player has to find a way to get on top of them, and then lead them somewhere by spraying ink in front of them. I love that, it's a great idea. The missions also get a lot harder in this campaign as opposed to the first one. They aren't devilishly hard yet, they're saving that for Octo Expansion and Return of the Mammalians, but there are some moderately challenging levels that might take you a couple of attempts to get through. One interesting addition to both the game and to the ongoing mystery of why are there giant objects in Splatoon, there are now squid rings, massive onion rings which can optionally be jumped through in order to get a few power eggs throughout the game. There are some things about this campaign I really don't like, though. My least favorite levels in any Splatoon game are the ones in this campaign set in the multiplayer maps. The reason for that is because the way they hid collectibles in these levels this time around is by having crates submerged in enemy ink. You can't see them, the crates won't appear until you've covered that enemy ink, and not all of the hidden crates have collectibles. Most only have power eggs. This leads to the experience of these levels, at least for me, to be running through the levels and clearing out all of the enemies, and then slowly covering the entire level with ink. This is just a tedious, boring process, and it's why I didn't end up grabbing all of the sunken scrolls on this replay. Even among the normal levels, some of these missions are just so long that the prospect of going back just because I missed a scroll or Sardinium isn't appealing. Speaking of the scrolls, I don't have that much to say about them here because honestly there isn't much in the way of new lore in this game. One of the sunken scrolls that I did find interesting mentions a new card game that's caught on in Inkopolis. They actually follow this up in Splatoon 3 by introducing a CCG minigame, so it's cool to see that foreshadowed here. I also appreciate how they explain the appearance of Lil Judd, a second cat like Judd who appears in the second game, being a clone that's created by opening a capsule holding Judd again. I think this explains why Judd has been around for hundreds of years. I don't think it actually is a cryopod. I think it's a cloning chamber, and we've just been getting dozens of new little Judds that grow into regular Judds, who then use the chamber to make another little Judd, and so on and so forth. That's cool. Overall, while the missions are a bit more involved and have some new mechanics, This feels like such a rehash of Octo Valley, it borders on just being a remake of it. Like, it's new, it's another event on the timeline, both of these stories are separate and canon, but Octo Canyon is to Octo Valley as The Force Awakens is to A New Hope. Being able to compare something to a J.J. Abrams Star Wars movie is never a compliment. Overall, this campaign is still fun, and because Splatoon 2 was on a newer, more popular platform, it brought a lot of new fans to the series. So being a rehash of the first game to the extent that you could really play either Octo Valley or Octo Canyon, and you get the same introduction to this universe experience, it's fine. It's still a good game. It's worth going through once. It's too bad that if you want to unlock everything, you have to go through the entire game 9 times. 9! The biggest problem I have with these missions is that, while replayability is great, they chose to tie unlocks to clearing the levels with each weapon. All of the levels with each weapon. If you want the hero charger in multiplayer, be prepared to play every single level with the hero charger. If you want all of the weapons in multiplayer for completionism purposes, be prepared to play the entire campaign 9 times. On paper, this is replayability, but there's a lot more to replayability than just forcing players to go through the same content over and over and over again. The experience doesn't feel meaningfully different. It's just doing the whole thing again. Oh, also, your upgrades are unique to each weapon, so I hope you enjoy grinding a ridiculous number of power eggs if you want to upgrade all of your weapons. This is kind of not a big deal because these weapons, they're solid, but you don't need them. You can use other weapons in multiplayer of the same archetype, just with slightly different stats like fire rate and range, and different sub and special abilities. So the solution to this is just don't do it. I don't want to play this campaign 9 times, so I'm not going to. I didn't. I never got any of these weapons. I don't think this content is bad, so don't do it actually excuses or forgives bad content or bad decisions, though. They still designed the game this way. Even if you accept that you just shouldn't play through the game 9 times, don't do the thing the game is telling you it's designed for you to do, this approach to weapons is so flawed that it actually hurts the whole game, even if you do play through it just once. Because the game is designed for you to be able to beat every level with any weapon, that means every level has to be designed for every weapon. They can't put enemies at a distance to incentivize snipers, because a player might be going in there with dualies. They can't design levels with close-range combat in mind, because the player might be going in there with a sniper. When they do rarely seem to design things with specific weapons in mind, like the grappling hooks in one level, which seem to be built around range, it makes going in with a short-range weapon super frustrating. Plus, you can't even go through with one weapon in mind your first time through, because some levels will require you to use a specific weapon your first time completing them, which is just annoying. I don't like using snipers in Splatoon, especially not in content which wasn't made custom for them. If you make me use one, I'm going to resent you for it. While I do appreciate letting you approach levels with other weapons, this is a really bad way of handling multiple weapons. It's fundamentally flawed, and kind of ruins the whole campaign. It makes all the levels have this really generic vibe, because they all had to be designed for the lowest common denominator, designed in a way that they can be completed no matter what weapon you use. The levels in the first game were all designed knowing what weapon the player would have in mind, because the splatter shot was the only option. That made those levels feel way better. The amiibo levels felt like a weird challenge because it felt like you were approaching levels in a way they weren't designed for, but framing them as challenge modes made that much more interesting. Here, I don't like it. The game features mostly new bosses with 2 exceptions. I think I like these bosses more than those in the first game. The first boss of the game is called Octo Oven, a large layered toaster oven you need to fight. It will periodically shoot out loaves of bread with faces on them, which raises a lot of body horror adjacent questions about Octarians. The oven panels themselves can't be inked, so you need to ink the sides of the loaves while they're exposed in order to climb to the oven's weak point. Of course, the time they'll be exposed and how much of the loaves can actually be inked will change each phase of the fight. The second boss fight is against Octo Samurai, a large Octarian wielding an ink roller as a samurai sword, riding a unicycle. This fight is a lot closer to a traditional boss fight, as you're not Shadow of the Colossusing up the side of the boss, instead dodging his attacks and getting in hits when you can. The third boss is also the first repeated boss from the first game, Octo Stomp, now called Neo Octo Stomp, and upgraded with an ink-resistant cover that has to be shot off before you can successfully climb up to his weak point. Other than that, it's a very similar fight to the first game. The fourth boss is the Octo Shower, who is carried by several octocopter enemies, showering a large amount of ink below as it moves. The player has to carefully shoot down the octocopters until the Octo Shower falls, exposing its weak point. One interesting note is that all of these campaigns, especially in Splatoon 2 onwards, like to give the boss's weapons equivalent to the special weapons the player can use in the multiplayer. The super moves each player can activate after inking a certain amount of territory. An example of this is how the Octo Shower will, in a later phase, get a Stingray weapon, a powerful ink laser capable of shooting through walls, which was introduced in Splatoon 2. I like these as a teaching tool which ensures players who complete the campaigns will have a better idea of what super moves they'll be facing in multiplayer. The fifth and final boss is a much improved DJ Octavio. This time around, Octavio is just straight up a boss fight. No more platforming through a level while trying to reflect his fists and push him back. I like the Octavio fight from the first game, but I definitely think I prefer the execution this time around. Once again, you're reflecting his fists back at him and avoiding his other attacks, like a shower attack where he charges you, or one where he throws several Octarians across the stage who need to be dealt with quickly, or else they'll create a tornado that covers a large area with enemy ink. The presentation of this fight really helps sell it. Octavio is joined by the brainwashed Callie, performing on a stage on his floating DJ booth platform. The actual arena is a stadium where hundreds of Octarians are attending the concert. Once you've dealt enough damage to Octavio, Marie comes in with a sniper rifle and shoots Callie, stunning her as you enter the second phase of Octavio's fight, with attacks coming at you much faster. Once you've progressed through this phase, you get a cutscene where Marie starts playing some of the Squid Sisters' music, and manages to snap Callie out of her brainwashed trance. This leads to a final phase of the fight where Callie and Marie perform a concert, as you are given a Rainmaker, a special powerful weapon usually reserved for one of the game's ranked multiplayer modes, and ride grind rails high above the arena to take Octavio down. It's a really great, memorable final boss sequence. The higher production values placed on the single-player campaign really show their face here. Once you've cleared the final encounter, you get a special announcement from Pearl and Marina that the Great Zapfish has returned to Inkopolis Square, and you're treated to another great interactive credits sequence. I really love how they go the extra mile on these credit sequences. The unique music and visual style of the games really shine here. The credit sequence being faded art on a wall you're bringing back to life, it's just really good. Vibrant, fun, fresh. Much like the first game, beating Octo Canyon unlocks the hero suit for use in multiplayer. Once you've spent power eggs to buy all possible upgrades, you can start trading them in for random tickets for use in multiplayer. Before we move on to my final thoughts on Splatoon 2's campaign, there's another mode in Splatoon 2 I kind of need to talk about in order for a lot of Splatoon 3's campaign to make any sense. Salmon Run. Splatoon 3's story is actually more of a follow-up to the previous game's co-op mode, Salmon Run, than it is to any of the previous single-player campaigns, so let's talk about Salmon Run for a moment so things make sense when we get there. Salmon Run is Splatoon's take on a horde mode. You might also call these survival modes or wave-based survival modes, but in my house we call these horde modes, so that's what I'll be calling them here. To define the term, a horde mode is a co-op game style where waves of enemies start coming at you, and your primary concern is survival and racking up score, rather than necessarily beating every enemy. Salmon Run handles this by throwing the player 3 waves, 100 seconds each. The enemies in Salmon Run are called Salmonids, and the goal is to defeat special boss Salmonids in order to take their golden power eggs back to the basket. In Splatoon 2's Salmon Run mode, you're working for a character named Mr. Grizz, who is represented by a statue of a grizzly bear eating a salmon, with a radio antenna sticking out of it, obviously implying that Mr. Grizz, whoever he is actually elsewhere. Mr. Grizz is the owner of Grizzco and is collecting golden power eggs for probably no reason. I mean, he's represented by a grizzly bear. He's probably eating them or something, right? I'm sure this won't come up again. The Salmonids come in all sorts of shapes and sizes, from the giant king Salmonids like Kohozuna or Ouroboros, to the tiniest of them all, the small fry. That's noun, not proper noun. Who run at you with little plastic spoons they try to beat you to death with. It's adorable. As far as the story, that's pretty much it in Salmon Run. It's not a narratively focused mode. The only other really interesting detail here is that one of the maps added to Salmon Run in an update called Ruins of the Ark Polaris give us some more deep lore, as it's set surrounding the crash site of a rocket built by the humans thousands of years ago to attempt to escape the Earth. It didn't go well. So that's cool. There's not really any other story to Salmon Run though, unless you count there being giant vegetables off in the distance in several of the maps, but there are all sorts of giant objects in Splatoon, and I don't want this video to turn into why are there giant objects in Splatoon an investigation, so I'll save that for another video. No, I'm kidding. I'm not going to do that. It might seem like such a threadbare premise for a side mode would be a weird thing to follow up on in the sequel, but well, you'll see. You'll understand why I had to mention it when we get to Splatoon 3 if you haven't played the game yet. Octo Canyon feels like an awkward period for these single-player campaigns, caught between what the first campaign was and what the later campaigns would become. If it's not clear, this is my least favorite of the 4 campaigns in the series so far. That actually surprised me when revisiting these campaigns all in a row for these videos. I expected the bigger scope of the levels and wider range of weapons to take into the levels to feel like an improvement, but the levels haven't developed enough of a unique identity to stand out all that much. It's not bad by any means, but it just feels caught between being a very simple single-player mode like the first, and the more ambitious and challenging modes of Octo Expansion and Splatoon 3. While this campaign was an important step forward for the series, it still felt secondary to the multiplayer focus of the game. It's the awkward adolescence of the Splatoon series. It needed to be either simpler like the first game was, or more complicated and interesting like the 2 campaigns still to come. Calling it an afterthought would be too harsh, but it's certainly not the focus of the game, and it would not be worth playing Splatoon 2 only for this mode. That's why it was such a shock when DLC was announced for Splatoon 2. Single-player focused DLC, the Octo expansion. That was where the single-player campaigns of Splatoon would really come into their own. Next time, we'll talk about Octo expansion.